Welcome to Successful Parenting, where we, Jackie Rue and Robin Choquette, share practical skills for families to build resilience and healthy connections. As practicing professionals and parents ourselves, we hope this podcast is a resource for parents to grow, reflect, and learn more about themselves and their children. Our approach is simple, tangible, and most importantly, we lead with compassion for the integrity of the families we serve. This podcast should not be taken as medical advice and is intended for informational purposes only. We love our work, and we can't wait to watch families gain confidence and open themselves up to new ways of successful parenting. Good morning, Jackie.
Good morning, Robin.
How are you today?
I am okay. It's so funny. Today is a bit more gloomy and windy, and it's interesting because yesterday was sunny and really nice out, and I felt that just bounce in my step, where today it is a little bit like, So I'm noticing we're having a lot of huge weather shifts in our area. And I think this is a time of year where a lot of children and families are heading into spring break and experiencing transition. And it's a very, kind of hectic time for many.
Right. And I think, that spring break can get us off of our schedules. We start to shift, as you said, it becomes, I think, hectic time. A lot of things are getting scheduled again, starting back up. Or things are closing down into the year for some activities. And so I think there's a big transition right now. And what I'm hearing families saying that they are trying to keep it all together, but it just feels like a lot. And when we talk about during times of transition, kind of what are the things that you can do? What are some hacks that you can use? We're not going to be able to take the stressful time away, right? It's part of the season. And this time of year is very busy, but it's all part of what typically happens. So now what can we do to bring in to be able to manage the stress better or the tension that we're all experiencing?
One thing I talk a lot about with families is on the weekend, trying to maintain some type of routine as well as boundaries and limits around technology. And it really can be challenging when you haven't done it a lot to put some of these different tips that we're going to talk about into play. Most of us do better when we have some type of routine and sleep schedule, and we're being mindful of our nutrition and amount of time on electronics. When we don't set those boundaries as parents, what ends up happening is we will notice that the child may struggle more with motivation with school, engagement with school, especially a long weekend. Really, most certainly, I see it after breaks. Going back to school and trying to go from like a spring break or a winter break or a long weekend, many students have a hard time getting back into the swing of things.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the things, Jackie, what you talk about is setting that routine, getting structure. And it may look different, especially those longer breaks, than it does during the school year. But I think doing that, and one of the things I like is, having some family time to have those open discussions about what would be helpful for you as we're transitioning back, instead of being completely wheels off and kind of running crazy, and how they can become collaborative with you.
For sure. And, I'm a visual learner, and I like to put a visual schedule and a routine on my wall, just with certain things, certain goals. It helps me to stay on track. I've had teenagers tell me that they like to see it, outings that are planned, just to see it on there. I mean, how many of our kids say, we didn't know we were doing that, or we didn't know you wanted us to do that. And even talking about before you go on break, that these are going to be the expectations. It can be a whiteboard. One mom told me even this morning, it could be just like one of those big pieces of paper. And I think explaining that some of the expectations on the routine will include, limits on game time and sometimes chores. If you're away on a vacation, it might be participating in, family activities and not just staying in the room. And it might even include time on cell phones. We're not going to have our cell phones out, meals or family activities. And so I think having all of these in the visual will make it easier to enforce and to follow.
Yeah, I have one family that the kids, they're pretty artistic and they love being creative. And so the family gives them the whiteboard because they add some graphics and drawings or or different colors into it. And then they're a part of creating that calendar. They really enjoy doing it. Older child that's an adolescent. They love just kind of putting their personality into it. And there we are, we're including, it's a joining of us coming together and making this calendar. I think sometimes we think it has to look a certain way, but I think if we get those kids involved in it, that's so important. In terms of setting those limits on technology, I think we're going to put phones around. Everybody puts phones away. If you want your child to put a phone in a basket, then you put your phone in the basket. You lock your laptop or your iPad away. I think those are so important. I think if the kids see us doing it, then they're going to be more likely to do it versus we're trying to punish them. This is something we're doing for a family. I had one family we talked about, and the parents were just really open. They said, I know we've been saying a lot to you about, but we recognize after kind of what you've said to us, we're on it as well. So we're going to limit ours, and we're asking you to join us. And the child was pretty willing when the parents put it out like that on the limits of technology.
And most kids, we recognize, are not going to say, this is wonderful. Like, thank you so much. Most kids, even the students I have that struggle going to school, they will say, it's the weekend. They know exactly, I should have a break. And sometimes I laugh. I'm like, you've had many a break. Even though they're going to argue it, it's okay to just lean in and say, I understand you're frustrated. I can relate to feeling frustrated. However, we are going to be following this routine because we know that it makes it easier for us all to go back to our lives after break.
Right. And I use the and a lot. I really encourage families to watch the buts. I know you're frustrated, but we're still going to do this. I do the ands. I know you're frustrated, and it's certainly understandable, and we're still going to do this. Or we're going to create some form of routine or some limits that's going to help all of us to re-engage after this break because the transitions are difficult. And so I think that and statement, is so important because the child often feels like it's minimized. My frustration isn't really validated or acknowledged. And I think being able to do that really helps them to get that you're hearing them, you're understanding what they're saying. The other part is that movement and just being able to get out in physical activity. I think engaging in nature every day. It's pretty amazing. Even kids will say once they get outside, what a difference it makes. Sometimes it's hard to get them outside. Research shows how connecting with nature and just being outside and getting movement shifts and changes mood, shift and changes motivation, engagement with others.
I've had families say, we're going to go on a walk, and the kids have said, well, I'm not going to talk. I don't want to go. Let's say a mom said one of the expectations is you are going to go on a walk or do something physical if you want your electronics for that hour. Some parents will say they just won't give it back or it's a huge fight. A lot of parents have ways to turn off the devices from their own phones if you have a child that's going to fight you. But if you do have a child that finally does go on the walk, they may just kind of not talk to you the first time and be really upset and say things like, you're making me feel worse. This is making me, more unhappy. A couple times of doing the walk, I have found pretty much every time, if you talk less and just walk with the child and set the expectation that they're not wearing ear pods and such, the child will start talking.
Absolutely. I do that in the car. Don't say they have to talk, but we have times in the car when I'm with my grandkids, I say no electronics for the next 15 minutes. You don't have to talk, but we're going to be off. And almost always there is a conversation, and I don't start the conversation. They will start the conversation. So when we think about sleep, nutrition is such a big thing.
I think nutrition is a big thing. And I think if I had to pick sleep too, I would say sleep is huge, and making sure that, we're not having tons of caffeine and overdoing it. Mm-hmm. Nutrition is one where you can let them have planned fun meals and let them have, more maybe excessive like treats and junk food that you normally would. But I do think the sleep routine is one of the largest factors that I see contributing to students having a hard time going to school after break or getting motivated to go back. And so I think if you totally throw your sleep routine off, while for some kids it might be okay, some kids just don't do well with that.
Right. I know one family we talked about the nutrition part, and the child was really into like ramen. And so the family said, you're going to make dinner tonight. You can use ramen, but you have to have some protein. And the child cooked eggs and put the eggs in and really got creative. And there had to be a vegetable with it. And it got the kid into starting to think about nutrition and cooking and how they could have what they wanted. And they were able to grab the nutrition and add it to it. And they said that made a less of a fight in the family when we talked about healthy nutrition and how to include it, because they allowed the child to be able to pick the theme of the dinner that evening. And I think that's a lot of fun during spring break as well, if it's possible to do, right?
Right, absolutely. Bringing in any fun like that, I think, is going to be huge. And again, a lot of kids are going to resist this, high school kids in particular, which is funny because high school kids tend to need it the most. You might have a child that really just bounces back, really doesn't matter if you have a lot of routine. I find that for most children, the children that have anxiety, school avoidant behaviors, autism, depression, those children, along with children that just naturally, you can tell they're exhausted or cranky if they don't have routine, your child. If you have a child in any one of those categories, then these tips are going to be a huge factor in how they're feeling about themselves, and then in turn, how it's going to go when they go back to school.
Absolutely. They're kind of simple, easy. Well, they're not easy, but I think they are simple. We don't need to make it over complicated, just basically 5 tips that we're going to be sharing on social media with you listeners. And we hope this helps you through this spring transition.
Yes, for sure. And I appreciate this conversation because I am going to send this off to a bunch of my parents because I know so many have reached out to me this week just asking about this.
Yes. Okay. Well, it was great having a conversation with you, Jackie. We have some great guests for upcoming episodes. We can't wait for you to come back. We're just excited.
Yes, I know, Robin. We have a lot of experts that we are going to be interviewing in the next couple of weeks. I am so excited about them. And I know we have a lot of topics that parents have emailed in and called in just to request. Just love doing this with you as always, Robin, and excited.
Yes, sounds great. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us, and make sure to subscribe and like us to catch our next episode, where we will take you on a journey to find new ways of successful parenting.